The night that changed everything. That night is etched into my memory with a clarity sharper than yesterday. With our parents gone for the evening, it was just me and my twin sister, Emma, left alone in the house, something that had happened more times than I could count. But what unfolded that night crossed the boundary between ordinary and unforgettable. The house was unusually quiet. The kind of quiet that sinks into your bones, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator or the gentle creak of old wooden floors beneath our feet. We were used to these moments, Emma and I. Over the years, we'd created our own little world during these absences. Time would stretch out before us, empty and waiting, daring us to shape it. Even though I was a few minutes older, Emma had always felt like the stronger one, bold, magnetic, unafraid. We were fraternal twins, yet people always said we looked strikingly alike. There were shared traits in our features, a mirror image familiarity that made it feel like we were two reflections of the same soul. That night, I was lounging on the couch, scrolling absent-mindedly through my phone, not really absorbing anything. Across from me, Emma was curled into her favorite spot, one arm over the backrest, eyes flickering between the glowing television and some private thought. She looked familiar, heartbreakingly familiar, but different, too. The air around us felt heavier, as though the walls themselves were listening in, as though the silence had grown ears and a pulse of its own. "Wanna watch a movie?" she asked suddenly, her voice slicing gently through the stillness. I looked up. Her eyes caught mine, dark, deep, thoughtful. There was something unspoken behind them, something I couldn't name. I shrugged, trying to act unaffected. "Whatever you want." She smirked. "Helpful." Then, with exaggerated slowness, she started flipping through the movie options. I smiled despite myself. "If you take that long, I'm putting on a rom-com," I teased. "Over my dead body," she shot back with a laugh. It was so easy with her, the banter, the rhythm, the way we fell into each other's orbit like it was the most natural thing in the world. But even under the warmth of shared laughter, there was a new undercurrent, subtle, but undeniable. A kind of tension, not hostile, not uncomfortable, just unfamiliar. She eventually landed on a film we'd seen a dozen times. One of those comforting ones you don't need to follow because every line is already imprinted in your memory. We settled into the quiet glow of the screen, shadows dancing along the walls. But my thoughts weren't on the movie. I found myself watching her more than I should have, not in the way one watches a screen, but like trying to read a poem whose meaning keeps changing each time you look. She seemed distracted, too, glancing at me when she thought I wasn't looking, her fingers tracing the edge of the couch in slow, idle movements. "What?" I asked softly, breaking the silence. She paused, then shook her head. "Nothing." I didn't believe her. "Liar." "Okay, maybe something," she admitted, leaning forward, resting her elbows on her knees. The flickering light made her face look like it belonged to both a stranger and someone I'd known forever. "You ever think it's weird? Being twins?" she asked suddenly. I tilted my head. "Weird how?" "Like, people think we're the same. Same face, same thoughts. But we're not." Her voice was gentle, but there was weight behind it. I nodded slowly. Her words stirred something deep inside, a truth I'd never put into words. "Yeah. It's like we've never really shown them otherwise." She looked at me, really looked at me, and I felt the space between us shrink. "Maybe we should," she said simply. The room went quiet again. But the silence didn't feel empty anymore. It was full of unsaid things, of memories, of questions. I turned back to the screen, trying to focus, trying to breathe. But my mind was tangled. I didn't know what I was feeling, only that it was raw and new and real. "You're quiet tonight," Emma said after a while, her voice softer than before. "What's going on in that overthinking head of yours?" "Nothing," I lied. But the truth was a storm inside me, one I didn't know how to name. Emotions, memories, fears, all pulling me in different directions. She didn't press me, but I could feel her watching me, as if trying to see into the heart of my silence. Then she shifted closer, just a small movement, but her knee brushed against mine. A simple touch, but it sent a wave through me. I tried to stay still, to keep my composure, but everything felt too fragile. "Sure, it's nothing," she teased gently, her tone playful, but there was something else behind it, something careful, searching. I gave her a half-smile. "Yeah. Just tired." We both knew I wasn't just tired. The movie continued to play, but it felt like background noise to a conversation we hadn't yet had, one that lived in glances and silences and the quiet rhythm of being known. Emma's laughter returned, easy and warm, and I found myself pulled back into her orbit. But beneath it all, something had shifted. We both felt it. A subtle crack in the way things had always been. Not a break, not yet, but a bend. A moment when the world took a breath and whispered, "Something is changing." And deep down, we knew, after that night, things wouldn't be quite the same. There was a moment when I felt it most keenly, every time our knees brushed under the soft glow of the TV, every time her gaze lingered a heartbeat too long. It wasn't uncomfortable, it was something else entirely, a current of emotion that sent a rush through me, though I couldn't name it. "Do you ever think about what it would be like if we weren't twins?" Emma asked, as though pulling me back from a daydream. Her question hung between us. I blinked, caught off guard. "What do you mean?" She shrugged and slid back into the cushions. "I don't know, if we weren't bound together, maybe things would feel different." It was a strange thing to say. Between us, everything had always fit so neatly, as if we were two halves of the same whole. Yet her uncertainty was contagious, and I found myself hesitating, searching for an answer I didn't have. "I guess it's hard to imagine," I said at last. "We've always been, us." She murmured the word as if testing its weight. "Always." Her eyes flicked toward mine, then away, and I realized she was grappling with something she couldn't fully explain. A sudden restlessness seized her. "Want something to drink?" "I'm going to get water." "Sure," I said, though my voice sounded oddly small. I watched her leave, her familiar silhouette framed by the kitchen light, and my thoughts tumbled over themselves. Something was shifting between us, something I'd never dared to acknowledge before. When she returned, she handed me a glass of water. Our fingers brushed, a brief, accidental contact, and her warmth radiated into me. She settled back on the couch so that her thigh pressed against mine. The closeness was normal to us, yet tonight it felt charged, like the space between us was suddenly smaller. "Do you ever wonder why we never talk about the really big things?" she asked, her tone low and sifted with thought. I frowned, tipping my head. "What do you mean?" "We're close, closer than anyone. But there are still things we don't say." I sighed. "Everyone has things they keep to themselves." Her gaze was unwavering. "We're not everyone, Alex." Her words struck me in the chest, like a hand pressed firmly against my ribs. We had always understood each other, shared secrets, swapped dreams. But there were things we skirted around, fears we didn't voice. "I guess," I began, but couldn't finish. The truth felt walled in by the comfort of routine. "That's your answer?" she teased, half-smile tugging at her lips. I rolled my eyes, trying to push away the unease. "What do you want me to say?" "Something real," she said simply, her voice softer now. The room felt suddenly smaller, our shared history pressing in on us. I turned toward the screen, pretending to watch. Emma didn't push me to speak, but she didn't move away either. The heat of her presence lingered, insistent and alive. Finally, she spoke again, her voice a whisper meant only for me. "Do you ever think about what happens next?" My heart skipped. I looked at her, searching her face. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, just for a breath, then answered her own question. "Us. After school, after everything changes. What if we're not always this close?" Her words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken fears. I realized she was talking about growing up, about the future pulling us apart. And in that moment, I understood, this wasn't about something forbidden or shameful. It was about the inevitable drift of two lives that had always been intertwined. "I'm scared," I admitted, voice trembling. "That we'll lose what we have." Emma reached out and took my hand, her grip steady. "Me too," she said. "But maybe that's okay. Maybe we just have to figure it out, together." We sat there, knees still touching, hands entwined, hearts pounding in sync. The movie flickered on, but it no longer mattered. In the silence of our living room, with the old house's wood creaking around us, we faced a new kind of unknown, one we would meet as only twins can, side by side. Emma's invitation echoed in my mind, "It's just me." Those words carried a tenderness so profound that, for the first time, I felt the ache of longing in a new way, an ache not of desire, but of knowing I belonged entirely to this moment with her. I slipped onto the bed, careful not to upset the quiet promise that lay between us. The room was bathed in the soft glow of the moonlight spilling through the curtains, casting gentle patterns on the quilt. Emma settled beside me, her shoulder brushing mine, and I felt a warmth that went deeper than skin. We lay there in silence for a long while, the only sound the faint hum of the house settling around us. My heart pounded in my ears, but not with fear, rather, with the thrilling awareness that our relationship had shifted, that the unspoken bond of childhood had grown into something more complex, something we would need to navigate together. "Do you remember," Emma began softly, "when we used to build forts in the living room?" She smiled, and I could almost see our younger selves crouched beneath blankets, torchlight flickering against our grinning faces. "How could I forget?" I replied. "We thought we'd discovered secret worlds in that one battered blanket." She laughed, the sound light and warm. "We were invincible then." Her voice grew quieter. I wondered, sometimes, if we ever outgrow that invincibility. I turned to face her, tracing the curve of her cheek with my eyes. "Maybe we don't outgrow it," I said. "Maybe we just learn that forts aren't always made of blankets, sometimes they're moments like this, walls of trust we build around each other." Emma's eyes glistened, and she reached out to tuck a loose strand of hair behind my ear. "I never want us to lose what we have," she whispered. "Even if it changes." I swallowed hard. "I don't think we can lose it," I promised. "Because it's part of who we are. No matter how we grow or where we go, that bond stays." She let out a breath, and for a heartbeat I thought she might say more, until she simply nodded and rested her head on my shoulder. I wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. In that embrace, the past and future seemed to merge, the carefree nights of our childhood and the uncertain days ahead. "Promise me one thing?" I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She lifted her head, looking up at me. "Anything." "That no matter what happens," I paused, searching for the right words, "we'll always be honest with each other. No matter how scary." Emma's lips curved into a gentle smile. "I promise," she said, pressing her forehead to mine. "Always." After that, we talked until our voices grew hushed with sleep. We shared hopes, dreams of where we might go to college, of the adventures we still craved, and whispered our fears about growing apart, about stepping into adulthood. Every confession felt like another brick in the fort we were building together, stronger and more enduring than any blanket could ever be. When my eyelids finally grew heavy, Emma folded herself closer. I drifted off to sleep with the tender weight of her warmth beside me, heart anchored by the certainty that no matter how our lives changed, we would always find our way back to each other. And in that knowing, I discovered a new kind of peace, one born not of ordinary love, but of a bond that had deepened, matured, and transformed into something beautifully ours. A bond that, like the forts of our childhood, would protect us through all the nights to come. That night, the house seemed to breathe around us, each sigh of the floorboards, each hum of the refrigerator a reminder that our secret still pulsed between us. Emma was on the couch, curled beneath a soft throw, her eyes fixed on the muted TV, but her posture was taut, as if she were listening for footsteps. I slipped onto the edge of the cushion beside her, my fingers brushing the fabric where she had been resting her arm. "I can't sleep," I said quietly. She didn't look at me at first, but I felt her shoulders loosen when I spoke. Finally, she turned, offering me a small, tired smile. "Me neither." I moved closer, careful not to close the tiny gap between us so abruptly. "Do you ever worry," I began, voice uncertain, "about tomorrow, when Mom and Dad come home?" Emma's gaze drifted to the dark window, the streetlight casting a pale glow across her profile. "All the time," she admitted. "But it's not them I'm afraid of." She paused, choosing her words as thoughtfully as she might choose a photograph for the family album. "I'm afraid of what happens if we let this go back to the way it was." I nodded, the couch spring sighing beneath us. "I don't want to pretend again," I whispered. "I don't want to act like nothing changed." She reached out and took my hand, the gesture so familiar it brought tears to my eyes. "We don't have to," she said, her voice steady. "We'll only move forward, together." The weight of her promise settled into my chest like a warm stone. I leaned my head against her shoulder and closed my eyes, letting the warmth of her presence soothe the tremor in my bones. In the quiet that stretched between us, we found a rhythm as old as our shared memories, the pulse of two hearts, synchronized in fear and hope. Later, when the distant sound of the front door signaled our parents' return, we lingered on the couch until the familiar clatter of keys and laughter drifted up the stairs. Emma slipped a finger to her lips and nodded toward the hallway. We rose in unison, smoothing wrinkles from our clothes and brushing away any trace of our confession in the quiet room. As our parents' voices grew louder, we retreated to our separate rooms, the soft click of doors sealing us into different halves of the house. I stood in my doorway, heart pounding, listening to the footsteps that crossed the hallway, knowing that behind each door lay a world we no longer quite belonged to, but one we would learn to navigate, side by side. That night, in the lonely hush that followed lights out, I thought of blankets and forts from our childhood, those flimsy walls we built to keep the world at bay. Now, the walls of our home felt both sanctuary and stage, sheltering a story that was ours alone. And though the future lay uncertain, I clung to one truth: as long as Emma and I were together, whatever came next, we would build our next fort, our next truth. Out of honesty, courage, and the unbreakable bond of being twins. The hush that settled around us felt almost solid, pressing gently against my skin as I sat beside Emma on the couch. We let the quiet stretch out between us, no need for words when the weight of our shared secret filled every corner of the room. At last, Emma turned, her eyes meeting mine with that familiar intensity that always made my heart pound. "Do you regret it?" she whispered, her voice barely more than a breath. I didn't hesitate. "No," I said, infusing the word with every ounce of certainty I could muster. Then, softly, "Do you?" A small smile curved the corner of her lips. "Never." Relief bloomed in my chest, softening the knot of anxiety that had been coiled there all day. Emma shifted closer, her hand finding mine. She laced our fingers together in a gesture so simple it was almost miraculous. "It doesn't have to be complicated," she murmured, thumb brushing my knuckles in slow, reassuring circles. "We'll take it one day at a time." I nodded, her words a lifeline steadying me in the swirl of everything new. For the first time since that night began, the unknown felt less like a threat and more like an unexplored path, one we would travel together. As the evening deepened into night, the silence between us grew comfortable. Emma leaned her head against my shoulder, and the steadiness of her breath against my arm felt like home. I closed my eyes, letting the warmth of her presence fill me, and the tension I'd carried all day melted away. Some questions, I realized, don't need immediate answers. They exist to remind us that life is a tapestry woven from both certainty and mystery, and that the most important journeys are the ones we share with the people who know us best. Over the next few days, everything seemed tinged with a new hue. Our routine carried on: classes, homework, dinner around the kitchen table where our parents chattered about their work trips. To them, everything looked unchanged. But Emma and I moved through each moment with a shared secret tucked between us, something fragile and bright. At school, I caught her glance across the cafeteria, and she gave me that small, knowing smile. It was like our own private code, 2 words spoken without sound. We walked side by side to our classes, our shoulders brushing in passing halls, the contact a reminder that we were not alone in the maze of lockers and crowded stairwells. One afternoon, we found ourselves back in our old fort space in the living room, blankets piled on the couch, pillows scattered across the floor. We dropped down into the cocoon of fabric and light, just like when we were children, but this time the air between us was charged not with childhood wonder, but with something deeper, the promise that whatever lay ahead, we would navigate it as a pair. I was scared, I admitted, my voice small in the dim glow. Scared of what this all meant. Emma reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear. I know, she said gently. I was too. But now I feel ready. Her confidence was contagious. In that soft fortress of blankets, I felt emboldened, ready to face any challenge so long as she was by my side. That evening, as dusk painted the sky in lavender and rose, we sat on the porch swing with cups of hot chocolate, the steam curling up like secrets in the air. Our parents were out again, and for a precious hour, the world belonged only to us. Do you think we'll ever tell them? I asked, watching the last sliver of sun dip below the rooftops. Emma took a slow sip, then set her cup down. Maybe one day, she said thoughtfully. But only when we're sure of what we want. I nodded, comforted by her patience. I don't know what the future holds, I confessed, but I know I don't want to lose this, us. She turned toward me, her eyes warm and steady. You won't, she promised. Because this isn't just a chapter in our lives, it's the foundation for everything that will come after. As the first stars winked awake overhead, I let her words settle into me like starlight, illuminating the path ahead. The night air, cool and full of possibility, wrapped around us. And with Emma's hand in mine and her steady presence at my side, I felt as though I could step into tomorrow with courage, knowing that together, there was no mystery too daunting, no uncertainty too vast, to face.